Okay, it's time for our photography portion of our juror talks. And we have Al Weems, who is both a juror and an accomplished photographer, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage now.
Got a couple of images coming up. This one is one I gave the Jurors Award to. It really resonated with me. In my own work, and certainly at this point in time for me, I debate with myself about would I rather capture or create. Now I know in order to create, you have to capture. I get that. So a couple of things this worked for me was, I know there are times I can be sitting in front of the computer looking at an image and saying, something's missing. I think it needs something else. Or that will happen when I'll even go back a few years and look at an image that at the time wasn't doing so much for me, but then I start to see a new life in it. And this worked for me because of that. I can imagine the base image and then the face being added. So I really liked it. Just to jump 1 second back to what other jurors was saying, talking about how we look at the images on a computer and then you wait to see what they look like in person. When I came to the judging Friday, I had printed out on 2 sheets of paper the top 10 images for me. And when I got to see a couple of them in person, I was a little disappointed. And that was, I think, because of the printing. So I always say, as a photographer, if you're not printing your own pieces, get a good relationship with whatever lab you're using. Create a dialogue with them so they know what you want. I really love this image for the simplicity of it. Having another issue that I fight myself with, having a background as a commercial, corporate, and advertising photographer, when I first looked, my learned thoughts are, get rid of those leaves. But I've learned to say, it's okay, they can be there. But that's my initial thought. So I always have to give myself a slap in the head and say, let it go. But I just love the simplicity and this image. And the irony I was thinking of it, and this did not get first place, but the irony of if this stone won, small stones, number 1. So I really liked that. But the other judges weren't with me on that. But I love that possibility anyway. This was the one we gave the second place award. That other commercial background of mine, when I first saw it, the left part of it with the electric or whatever poles and everything made me say, I wish that wasn't there kind of thing. But then I could never stop thinking about this image and the face of the subject. And it just kept drawing me in. And the other 2 judges, again, this was a consensus as number 2. There was no discussion that it wasn't. So, and the simplicity of this just kept drawing me to it. And again, as a commercial background photographer, that automobile inspection sticker I don't like, but that's real life, and that's what they are. I just love this story, or whatever this story was, and I think it could be many stories, and that's the power of any of the medium that's out here. The other jurors have mentioned too, it's not easy to get down to a 1, 2, and 3 thing, but I think anyone who was juried in should be proud that you got in. And I've entered things where I got a best of show, and same image didn't even get in someplace else. So there's no crying in photography, I guess. Thank you. Thank you.
Next speaker is another one of our jurors, David DeMellon, who is the managing director of the Rhode Island Center for Photographic Arts, and he's also a photographer in his own right. So please welcome David up to talk about some of his favorite works.
Thank you all for being here and for participating, for entering work. I thought I would present a quick walk through the exhibition with an eye towards the work that was selected and why, the process behind it. So photography is, at the end of the day, all about capturing light. It's the quality of light that presents itself to you that really makes an image. And this particular one, among many, really represents that in a very unique way. What sets this picture apart from any other windmill picture is really the quality of light. It has some other things going for it. The composition, it picked up second place, partly based on the image itself, largely based on the quality of the print. That becomes a big part at the end of the day. And one of the nice things about working with the folks here and during this particular show is, while the initial selection is made online, the award selections are made in person. So we're basing it on exactly what you're seeing. Photography can be many things. The one thing it is a subtractive process. It's a matter of subtracting out the things that you're not interested. Painting, on the other hand, is an additive process. Every stroke, every mark was added. Painting also has this luxury of creating things that didn't actually exist in the real world. Photography, on the other hand, is all about being faced with the whole world in front of you and deciding what to subtract out. The quality of light really plays into the decisions made here. Composition, lighting, exposure, focus really make this a standout piece. And it keeps going. Those decisions are really what separate photography and the selections that go in. It's all about the play of light across the frame, using the whole frame where you can. And then you have the ability to tell a story. The quality of light, that moment in time, the fact that the exposure is set to a point where it drops out a lot of unimportant details. A long exposure, so you get this silky water, something beyond what the human eye can see. Photography also has the power to take you around the world, to see things you would never see, and motivate you to travel to places you might have never known about. To see things, if you've ever heard of a painted desert, this isn't in the US, but that's what they're talking about. The ability to abstract, the ability to see into an inner world, the ability to see beyond, to capture beyond human vision. This is an infrared, I'd guess probably in the 820 spectrum. below what the human eye can register. The ability to create an image from an idea, the ability to communicate a concept beyond the physical object that you're looking at. Nature photography is a whole other thing, and I always am in awe of the people who have that ability to sit there and keep at it until the right scene presents itself, and then to produce something so unexpected and so lyrical in what is basically a straight shot. It's all about timing, it's about persistence, and then there's the ability to create your own reality, your own world, to execute an idea. Composition and form. The fact that that crane is off center really drives the image. The play of light from top to bottom. That crane is moving across the frame. The duck is moving. He's been somewhere, he's going somewhere. You've got this wonderful blue arrow in his wake that's really driving the image. And this is just a remarkable little gem, the surface tension of the water. As Al mentioned before in the landscape picture, maybe that's all it needed to be in the frame. You don't need to accept the rectangle that you're presented with. I am a big advocate for using the whole frame, doing the composition in camera, spending the time to get it as close to what you want. But at the end of the day, sometimes the world just doesn't fit into that 2x3. And this is another very interesting idea of what happens when you string separate images together to create a composition, to tell a story. This is a truly remarkable piece. The challenge with this kind of work and a lot of the more abstract work, textures and that, is your eyes don't actually see, your brain sees. Your brain interprets the light that your eyes captured. And when you're looking at something on screen, your brain fools you into thinking there's texture and there's depth and there are all these other things going on. When you stand in front of a physical print, you're not fooled. It's a flat piece of paper and you're left with that reality. So the printmaking process really becomes critical to try to tweak that to get the most out of it. This is a true gem. This was my juror's pick, which really represents, all the classical forms in photography, and what really made it stand out besides this wonderful procession. It's an image you can walk right into. You keep coming back to it, wondering if somebody's going to walk into the frame, around the corner. But it has a texture and a quality that it almost looks like an Escher print or drawing, and it really bridges that divide in a wonderful way. This little gem is much more powerful as a print than it is on screen here. Scale matters a lot. The fact that they chose to print it so small really gave it an incredible power. And it is totally after the fact that we realized that at the end of the day, it's a picture of small stones for the Small Stones Art Festival. That was not part of the decision-making process. The quality of light in this is truly remarkable. It draws you right into the image, into the frame. So with that, I will leave you at Avery, who is going in a very different direction, and photography that asks questions, that make you wonder, that keep you coming back to wonder, what is she thinking of? What's she looking at? What's next? So, what's next? What are you going to do next? And that's my very brief walk through the presentation. How'd we do? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I am literally honored to have my pieces in the show. This is an absolutely wonderful show. It's not because my pieces are in here. Without them, it would be a great show. My photos that I have here, most of the photos that I've taken within many years now, have been within a 15-minute walk from my backyard. And I just want to talk about that journey, how I ended up getting there. And it started back in 2017 when my wife and I had that opportunity to take a workshop in Italy with a bunch of different artists. And it's been many, many years since I've done photography, so I'm kind of getting myself introduced to it. And I'm wondering, you know, what kind of photographer do I want to be? And I, you know, we're out in Italy in the countryside, and I said, well, I feel myself as a landscape artist. And so I'm an early riser, and we were staying at this gorgeous vineyard, and I happened to notice that they were having some great sunrises. So for 2 days, I got out in the dark, and I was the only one there, and I'm standing there, and I'm shooting away, and I ended up with some nice photographs, got them framed. They're up on our in our kitchen wall. And the one thing that I realized was two things I realized. Number one was to get the photograph. I had to be there, and that's true of any photographer. The second thing that came to my mind was I was literally standing in somebody's backyard, and from the creative aspect, the fact that just I had to be there to get the photograph really wasn't all that satisfying. And I read a lot, and so part of my photographic journey is reading. I read a lot of different things. And one of the things I came across was something Thoreau had written, and it's not what you look at, it's what you see that matters. What happens is a lot of times we look at stuff and our experiences end up filling the spaces for us. We have expectations. So when we go look at something, we don't see it, we look at it. And then the last thing that happened was I realized that the root word of imagination is image. And that's what the camera does. So I took all those things, decided that I'm going to walk out my backyard, and I'm not going to photograph what I see. I'm going to photograph, I'm going to photograph what I see and not what I look at. And I'm going to photograph it trying to use my imagination. And that's my journey. So yeah, this was actually one of my first ones that I took. This is back in 2014. It was January 1st, and late in the day, and I saw this. And this was just a leaf that had fallen late in the season, and there was some fast freezing ice, and there was this crack in the ice, and I've many times tried to theorize what that shadow underneath the leaf is, and I have my own ideas, but actually this is one of my favorite photographs. And again, you know, on the rocks, I came across the thinnest of ice. I mean, you couldn't get anywhere near. This is a very difficult photograph to get just because it was so thin. And that's all it is. It's just rocks under a thin layer of ice. Nice. That's it.
Hi, I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person this evening. My name is Nancy Burns. I'm the Stoddard Curator of Prints, Drawings, and Photographs at the Worcester Art Museum. And I'm going to take a couple of minutes to talk about some photographs that I find interesting because I think that there's lots of ways of thinking about what makes a great photograph. There's technical prowess that, you know, think about Ansel Adams and having these kind of meticulously crafted shot and printed photographs. But then there are also great photographs that don't even use a camera, that they're these cameraless photographs that are made maybe by putting a leaf on top of a piece of treated paper that then turns blue when you drop it in water. And a type of photography that I find really interesting are photographs that you need to do kind of a double take or spend a moment to understand what exactly you're looking at or how something was made. Having said that, in this case, I've picked 3 photographs that for different reasons do kind of make you have a double take or seem to exist on 2 different planes. Something that might be the literal representation of what the camera was in front of, and then also once printed, how do you look at it as a viewer? Do you see it as something different or as multiple things? So this is the first photograph I'm drawing your attention to, Copley Cat. And I have to admit, I don't know exactly where this is, but it's ostensibly an architectural space. But because of how it was framed and the attention to, high contrast, it becomes very planar and flat. And so it's reading as the thing that the camera was in front of, but also takes on this really kind of flat, graphic, modernist quality. And to me, that's very interesting. Also, this is a digital photograph that would have been, taken with a camera that shoots in color. I don't know if the artist happened to catch this in light such that it was actually appearing monochromatic, or if there was work done post-production that shifted this into a grayscale monochromatic photograph. But because of its ability to kind of exist as both 3-dimensional and very planar, I find this very interesting, and it's technically very well executed. Moving on, a second photograph that I wanted to draw people's attention to is this photograph by James Hunt. And what I find interesting about it is, again, it is a technically well executed photograph, but what are you looking at? Now, I'll tell you what the title is, but upon immediately looking at this, it seems to exist as something that could be like almost like an abstract painting or a pastel. But we also know that it is a photograph of something out in the world, and this is a spillway at the golden hour. So, water rushing over, and, we're at the golden hour, it gives us a clue that it's likely sunset, for example. So we are seeing something that is a document of a place and a time. But it reads as, again, you see how flat this becomes because of the motion of the water? I find it really interesting when artists are able to do that. One thing that you may also want to keep in mind is, like the photograph that we had just seen beforehand, it's taken at a very small piece of real estate. So we don't have a lot of information over here to situate us in where exactly the photograph was taken. And that's part of the reason it was successful at transcending, appearing as a very literal copy of the world or document of the world. And just while we're here, I will note that Roberta Oakley's photograph above does a bit of that kind of work as well, where in here, she uses the reflection in the water, but it has the effect of kind of reading almost like watercolor or not necessarily a photograph. And part of how she was successful doing that is that she doesn't give all of the foliage above. She gives you just enough to know that this is reflected, and what we're seeing here, we know continues up here. So you kind of are getting by looking at the reflection, you're actually getting a bit of information about what's not in the photograph. This is the last object that I have chosen that I wanted to point out to you. And, you know, looking at this, we can read what it is representationally. I mean, it's kind of hard because it's very, very light in color and pastel. But it reads like a watercolor as opposed to being a photograph. And this was taken with film, you know, an analog photograph. But the decision to print it on something like a toothy watercolor paper actually makes this not look like a photograph anymore. And this is an example of, while I can read what the representation is, what had been actually photographed, the use of materials by the artist, Mr. Craig Poehler, his use of materials actually in many ways changes how you look at the photograph as well. And I think that this was a really great example of an artist who understands how the act of printing is in itself going to impact the way a photograph is going to appear and be received by its viewer. I did want to, at the last minute, kind of quickly point out one other photograph, which this photograph by Michael Zeitz is, you know, it's very challenging to work in a panoramic capacity because the nature of a panoramic photograph causes it to bend. And knowing how far you can go in doing that is very challenging. But also in this case, the artist has taken advantage of that effect. So we have the kind of this appearance of a curved ceiling, which then, you know, the artist has taken advantage of that in creating kind of a mise-en-scène where the use of a panoramic shot is actually really conducive to documenting the environment. And I mean, I will say that I have a warm, soft spot for photographers who choose to photograph things that aren't necessarily beautiful in the conventional sense. But of course, this is like, look at the color that's been used. This he's found what makes this a kind of almost studio-like space. It could be something that it actually oddly reminds me of Impressionist painting, given the colors and the use of light and how the space is framed. So I'm also find this a very interesting photograph as well. In closing, I first want to say thank you to Small Stones. I can't tell you how generous and organized this staff is, and I've really enjoyed working with this organization for multiple years now. And I think it's also great to see how creative and interesting our own community is in, you know, the arts. And in my case, I'm particularly interested in the work you all are doing in photography. So thank you for allowing me to join you virtually, and best of luck in your art making in the coming year.
There are a lot of good works submitted, so making choices was difficult. The images I have chosen to show here are the ones that spoke to me, and the ones that clearly illustrate some principles of composition and technique that I felt might be helpful, not only to the artists, but to all of us, as we all carry iPhones now, and they're us all photographers. The images are in alphabetical order. Puddle by Leah Alberga. This image is an unusual take of the Duomo in Florence, Italy. I love in the top right how the stones reflect the glow of the light from the church, and the two sets of diagonals are juxtaposed and bring a bit of drama. Daffodils Reflected by Linda Barnes. This is a beautifully executed macro shot with an unusual composition and gorgeous out-of-focus areas, which are officially termed bokeh. It also has wonderful pastel colors. Some people hold that the beauty of an image is in the out-of-focus areas, and I thoroughly agree. Uluro's Shadow Dance by Ken Crater. Captured in the Australian outback, these frolicking shadows, cast by the sun onto a beautiful rock face, create a timeless image of the human beings lost in the moment. It leaves the viewer pondering about the story behind these dancers. Solitude by Agnieszka Day. This moody photograph uses a snow-covered buffalo to balance out the vestigial trees. The almost completely white image makes great use of the darker areas as a counterpoint. An Old Tree at Water's Edge by Norman Eggert. This lovely image has a timelessness to it. The sepia toning makes it appear historic, as does the lightening around the edges, which is reminiscent of how old photographs' edges fade from exposure to air. The mass of the tree is very nicely offset by the fine detail of the leaves and the brush surrounding it. The Butterfly and the Crescent by Anthony Federico. This is an impressive example of astrophotography. 338 shots were taken over 5 nights and combined to reveal what the eye cannot see. The reds are brought out further by the complementary green. There's a lot of detail to explore in this image. Boathouse Light by Diane Gray. This carefully composed, symmetrical yet asymmetrical image brings a lot of interest to explore within the shadows. The outside world is partly visible, yet intentionally excluded. Inside, there is tranquility. Walking on Air by Agnes Hagopian. This image has a wonderful uncertainty as to what we are actually seeing. It could be a reflection, but remains a bit enigmatic. This prompts the viewer to further explore and find the reflection, which is mimicked by the texture on the right, which echoes the model's legs. Bloom Below, Green by Sherry Holland. In this image, the viewer immediately notices that there's something different. There's a dreaminess. It turns out that the flowers are submerged in water and that Sherry used some milk drops to create a cloudiness that makes this so ethereal and moody. Great Blue Heron Mating Rituals by Darlene Holman. Bird photography is always a challenge, as birds rarely do what you expect. Darlene has a very clear shot of 2 magnificent specimens. The blue sky forms a sort of negative space, keeping the viewer's eyes firmly on the subjects. Window to the World by Michael Killeen. Michael carefully captured the exposure in this image to keep detail in the highlights and maintain the glow against the dramatically dark interior of the building. The dark negative space nicely offsets the illuminated areas. I love the bottom left where the light has reflected off the curtain onto the wall. Parish Light by Richard Lapping. The strong diagonals lead the viewer's eyes up and in. A strong supporting actor is the black handrail at the bottom, which serves as a leading line to return the eye back into the image. Both the highlights and the shadows are beautifully rendered. The black and white treatment gives it a classic look. I would guess that color would only distract from this image. Swift River and Morning Fog, number 4, by Donald McAllister. The lovely streaks of sunlight and small fog bank are augmented by a highlighted foreground whose detail creates a magical mood. The image gets softer and softer as the landscape recedes. Panther by Megan Morrissey. This artfully cropped image is a symphony of blacks, punctuated only by the whiskers and the eye. You can feel the animal instinct is completely alive. Impressions of Autumn by Dmitry Papkov. In this image, the numerous diagonals keep leading the viewer's eye back to the center. The landscape forms a natural vignette, and the atmospherics create a soft, gauzy light that is quite enchanting. Ella by Mark Phillips. Ella Fitzgerald looks transported in this image. Her hand creates a conversation with her face. The jet black background pops her out front and center, and you can feel her giving the song all she has. Life Goes On by Colleen B. Riley. Perfect reflections tend to be a bit boring. This image has a greatly differing direct and reflected views, with changes to color, detail, and texture. I am especially fond of the difference in the color of the reflected leaves, and I love that there is no horizon line, leading the viewer to conjecture once the tree has been explored. Self-Portrait in a Surprised Mood by Marie Saxon. This portrait not only shows a startled expression, but also surprises the viewer once they notice the bubble wrap covering her face. The sharpness of the mouth and eyes belie how much her face is actually concealed, and the pops of red are a bonus. Sunflower Burst by Cindy Wilder. This image is simultaneously sharp and soft. It has a lovely glow, and the repetition of patterns is helped by the varying angles of each part of the sunflower. The Man in the Window, Venice, Italy by Nancy Sostak Wright. The lovely textures of the shutters lead the viewer's eye to the man looking at us. The small radio provides an incongruous counterpoint to the building that is likely hundreds of years old. And while the subject knows he is being photographed, he remains steadfast, as solid as the walls. Calligraphy by Jeff Wu. This is a beautiful capture of these iconic mountains in China. The clouds alternately emphasize and mask the peaks, creating a lovely path for the eye to follow as it explores. The artist has carefully kept white away from the edge of the picture to prevent the image from leaking out into the borders. Bravo to all you photographers. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay, you all hear me okay? Ken, thank you very much. And I want to thank the whole committee also. It was a real privilege to be invited to judge your work. You know, well, listen, you know what Ken said, I'll tell you, it's interesting. As my grandmother used to say, it pays to get older. You know, so I was one of those fortunate people who learned from people like Ansel Adams, influenced by Edward Weston. He died in '54, so I was in 4th grade then. I didn't know him, but I did see a show of his at the Museum of Modern Art when I was in high school, like in '59, and it blew me away. And ever since then, I've been like addicted to the art of photography. And you know, I was influenced a lot by Minor White when he first came to MIT in '67. I worked with him privately at his home, took a number of workshops and assisted him in some workshops. And then Paul Caponegro, who recently passed away last November, a good friend of mine, and for years and years and years. So that's why I say it pays to get older, you know, because I just had some great experiences and just met some wonderful people. One thing I've learned, well, it's a quote by Meister Eckhart, who was a 13th century German theologian. And he had said, art is not just for special people, but everyone is a special kind of an artist. You know, like as Janet said, I could have chosen 10 or more, you know, really great photographs that stood out. But with 3 judges and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place and some honorable mentions, we had to kind of pare it down and compromise, you know, but we all have our own individual opinions because of our own, you know, background and experiences. Oops, I'm pulling a Janet here, hitting things. So just put my hands behind my back here. So I just wanted to kind of comment that everyone's work was really pretty wonderful. What can I say? You know, there are many things that go into making a really meaningful photograph. You know, like I talk about when I give lectures to different organizations, I talk about 3 ingredients required for making really meaningful art. You know, attention, intention, and awareness. You know, like attention to detail, for instance. Like the photograph is much more than subject matter. The camera only reacts to the light reflecting off the subject matter. You know, just as film did, now the sensor in our camera or iPhone pretty much works the same way. You know, it's recording the light that's reflecting off the subject matter. So we are really photographing light. That's what photography is really all about. We're photographing the light reflecting off subject matter. And you know, the intention, why are we doing this? What is this need to create? This is something that I find really fascinating, especially when I watch these like Nova shows about discovering, art and cave walls that's like 30,000 years old and older. It's almost like we're born with this kind of creative gene within us. The need to create is just within absolutely everybody. So I could actually ramble on for a long time on that theme, but I chose 3 different photographs that I'm going to talk about a little bit. But before we do that, I'm going to quote from a book I just read. So I didn't really prepare much, but I wrote this down because it really applies to everybody. I just thought it was quite a wonderful quote. This came from a book by, his name is Roman Hannes. The book is called From Beyond Ayahuasca, which is actually sort of a medicine plant in the Amazon basin. So the guy who wrote the book, Roman Hannes, studied with a shaman from one of the tribes in the Amazon basin. And I just took this paragraph out of the book. Applying, and it's not just photographers, everybody. Applying an artistic lens to our experience helps us see beyond the external layers and plumb the depths of mystery, paradox, and the beauty of being human. Anyone who has ever fallen in love with life becomes a poet of evolution, capable of attaining the inconceivable, for it's the poetic inspiration that connects us to the essence of being alive. In what ways have art, poetry, and other forms of expression helped you connect with your true essence? Well, I just love that. So I thought I would just share that with you folks, because it really applies to all of us. We've all been, our lives would be very different, if we weren't creative. And, you could be a creative cook, a creative gardener, a creative housekeeper, a creative mother and father, or painter, artist, poet. It's all about being creative. Okay, so I chose a few photographs to talk about. This is by Rich Lapping, Sudbury River. I didn't see Rich. Is he here? I guess not. Well, I just fell in love with this photo. In fact, as soon as I walked in, it's on the far wall there, I think like 2 over, and it caught my eye straight away. Rich has, I would say, a recognizable kind of vision. I know his work for many, many years, and if there were like 10 different photographers having a show and there were no names on it, I could easily pick, Rich's out. Which I find really fascinating, because we're all kind of very special individuals, and we see in our own unique kind of way. So he's really penetrating something really deep here, and the technique is so important. Subtle things that you don't even know unless you're really into photography. Kind of a slight vignette in the corners to bring your eye, into the middle of the image. I often tell people that, like God didn't create the world so we could just photograph it. We have to create with the tools at hand. And I often give an example of like a potter who may throw clay down on a wheel. He doesn't say, I'm done, that's my masterpiece. He shapes it. He uses his hands and creates something. But we create with light. We used to do it in the dark room, by keeping our hand between the light and the paper, giving more or less light to certain areas or changing the contrast. We basically do the same thing now with the computer. So technique is really important. And another thing which is really important about photography, good technique is totally invisible. Now, if there were a big blotch in there, or just something that was really distracting, that would really jump out at you. But it's kind of a perfectness about it. Nothing really stands out or jumps out as being imperfect. As I said, good technique is invisible. So when you're looking at it, as if you're there on the shore and you're experiencing this particular image, which Jim had, created with the technique available to us. Black and white photography is an abstraction by its nature, because the world is not in black and white. The world is in color, and it's 3-dimensional. So photography is, definitely an abstraction. All kinds of photography is an abstraction So, and it's created by the photographer. If you were standing right there, it would look very different. Some of you may be familiar with the work of Edward Weston, and he's the photographer his work first influenced me. And he kept a diary called the Daybooks of Edward Weston, and there are 2 volumes in it. And I remember reading a passage from his wife, Charis Weston, who said every time we went to the original scene of where Edward made, these wonderful photographs, they'd find little tan sand hills and crumbled up roots or something. But, it was Edward's vision that made them so magnificent. And that's what, Rich Lapping has done here with this particular image. Just clouds and a reservoir and trees, but this has a magical quality to it. So I'm sorry he's not here. He would have liked to hear that, I think. So, okay, let's have the next by James Hunt. And I didn't see James here either. These guys are going to hear from me later. Let me tell you. So, there's just a lovely balance from this. The stronger roots coming from the bottom kind of pulls your eye in. It's it's just obviously just a reflection of trees on a fairly still river with a tiny bit of ripple to it, and it's just so. It sounds like a pun, fluid, if I may say. Obviously, it's water. And just a lovely balance to it. And again, it brings your eye into it. There's nothing that really distracts from the image. It's very plain and very simple, but yet, very beautiful. And sometimes, like less is more. Often we try to put too much into our images, but just to really focus on a small little area sometimes really conveys the whole story. So I just really think this is a marvelous photograph also. Okay, we will go. This one also, in color. Neil, I forgive you. That's okay. No, but this also really caught my eye. Like the way Neil saw this is very, very unique. And the structure itself with all the triangles and different shapes and the light coming through. This lovely path of light. You kind of enter from the bottom and zooms, right into it. I just think it's just a lovely kind of image. And, sometimes people talk about rules of composition. Ansel Adams had said that, you can apply the rules of composition after the fact. This is almost like the rule of thirds, where the bottom part of it kind of ends about 2/3 of the way up. But if it didn't, it might still work. Now, I have another rule I call Rosenstock's rule of halves. And sometimes that works also. It just kind of depends. But the balance of this, is more broken up where your eye goes zooming, right into it with those lovely kind of shapes like all over the place. So it kind of pulls you in. You can't help but not feel like you're really dragged into that particular image. And also, as I said, good technique is invisible. If there was something really wrong with it, that's what you would see. But you don't. You just kind of relate to the image as Neil saw it. So it's a beautiful image. So I just chose those 3 to talk about, today. But there were, many, many others. I'm just thinking through the top of my head. We don't have them here, but that's okay. Neil also had another photograph of a bookcase that I thought was really beautiful. And James Hunt had another one of a waterfall, that was really nice also. And Rich Lapping had another one of a lovely light. It looked like it was taken in a church, so quiet light on the staircase. And a lot of really beautiful work in this particular show. So, again, Ken, thanks for inviting me here, and I really, really enjoyed it. So.
We have a number of artists lined up to talk about their work, most of which is on display here. The first of which is a friend and fellow member of the Worcester County Camera Club, Rich Lapping. So, Rich.
Before I get started, I just wanted to congratulate everybody that got into the show, and Ken Salome, if that's how it's pronounced. When I was looking at the online when everything was brought to fore, I really loved his work. And I saw it, and I just remarked that I thought every piece that he did I would have been very happy doing them myself. I kind of started out pretty much as a documentarian, but as I gained some level of control over the process, I developed a keen interest in abstract photography, which morphed into my favoring black and white imagery, and took another step forward when I got into infrared photography. So ultimately, I would describe my work as a combination of what I saw and felt instinctively. I guess I got a lot of good feedback early in my learning process, and I began to learn to trust my instincts. And then that led to me taking what I felt when I took the image and then translate it to another level in the digital darkroom. And that's where I do all my work. I spend a lot of time editing, experimenting. I've really enjoyed learning the process. There's still a lot to learn, and I'm ready for some images. One of the more remarkable things about these images, and I have 6 images here, and they're 2, 2, and 2. Basically, we're taken on the same hike in Sedona, and this is one of my personal favorite images because it kind of, in my mind, it evokes a little bit of Ansel Adams. It's my homage to Ansel, although I would never call it that. And I guess the other remarkable thing about infrared photography in this case is the way it just brings out light and tonality and things that you don't see. I kind of anticipate, I know what may occur, but I never really know exactly what will occur. But it then, I know how to embellish it. I think in terms of what Al said originally, I think this kind of covers the whole frame. I think through working with Ron Rosenstock and his group for 10 years, I've kind of honed what I see in terms of how to construct an image. Same hike. And I think the other aspect of this hike is at the end of it, I was convinced I needed a knee replacement. And it was the last long hike that I took before that actually occurred a few months later. Was an image that I actually considered putting in the show, but it was the reason when we went to Sarasota last winter, we had been there a couple of years prior to that, and there was this fig tree that just had an unbelievable network of roots, and I spent a lot of time there and loved just photographing this in every which direction. This is probably my favorite from that particular group. This was, later in the day after I was with my wife and some friends, and they just hiked off by themselves while I spent time on the fig tree. And when I came across this, it was at a display that was blocked on both ends, and I could only catch this hand holding it and leaning to the side. And it just, I had no idea how it would end up, but it became one of my favorite shots from that particular trip. This is from a trip to Iceland, one of the first times I was actually exposed to infrared photography. And one of the more remarkable things about this shot is it was taken from a moving vehicle. I was in the back of the bus, and I really couldn't hear. Ron Rosenstock was leading the trip, and I couldn't hear anything that was going on from back there or what he was talking about. It was shot at 1/8,000th of a second, and it was like, okay, maybe this will work, and it did work. When I showed Ron this image, he said, "Where was I?" And, well, where he was right in front of the bus talking. He wasn't paying attention. So. Another trip from this, photo from the same trip. It is infrared, kind of an iconic spot from Vik, Iceland. It was taken from the beach, Black Sand Beach, and I think it might have been the same beach that Ron once got toppled over by a rogue wave, I think. but you know, I just love the way everything moves up, and you know, it's a simple image. I think I'm done. Thank you. I'm from Liverpool, UK, as is my lovely wife here as well. And I've been here since 1991. And talking about sort of photography, I started roughly when I was 20-ish. That's years ago. And I've been doing it for quite a while. My dad was an avid photographer as well. He had his own darkroom. I had a full darkroom set up for many, many, many years. I've spent many happy hours and sad hours in the darkroom. But lately, of course, it's all gone digital. But for myself, I have gone back to film. And so, although I have a full digital setup, I'm an avid Nikon and Leica shooter in digital. But I also have a full Nikon Hasselblad setup for film as well, and I've gone right back to film. So again, thank you for everyone. Thank you for the judges and having one of my photos, which we'll talk about in a bit in the show. I like black and white very much indeed. Always have done. This is a guy called Abel, and he was an itinerant guy. You might have recognized him if you're in the Northbridge area. He was there for many years, and he used to sleep rough. And by the way, you know, this is not taking advantage of him. I used to help him, gave him boots and stuff. And actually, he signed a photography release. So we're all perfectly clear on this. It's not taking advantage. Some people don't like taking photos of itinerant folks in the streets because maybe it looks like you're taking advantage of them. This one, he was perfectly okay with it. But he had a fantastic face. Fantastic face. And I think sort of the black and white suited it more than color. These were taken with Nikon D6, I think it was, this time. But they, I like his moustache as well. And I'm trying to grow something, but it's not working out too well. We'll see. But again, his eyes. And actually, he was born in Spain, interestingly enough. And he told me a lot about his life. But I haven't seen him for a few years. I hope he's still okay. But, you know, he ain't been around much. So, I just went down to Woonsocket, somewhere in Rhode Island. And they were demolishing a factory, as most of them are nowadays. And I walked down the side of it, and this mechanical claw thing, and it was coming out of this. It wasn't actually, they were spraying water there to keep the dust down, and it just struck me as being like a monster sort of coming out. This kind of motion. And of course, I deliberately emphasized the texture in this. I use Silver Fast, I think it is, for doing most of my black and white conversions, although it's all done in Lightroom and then back into Silver Fast and then back into Lightroom again. But I just wanted to sort of come peeping over the top. It reminded me of a monster. Anyway. This one I call Lonely. This was shot on film, Ilford FP4, HP5. And it was in a place in Liverpool called the Pier Head, which is, if you've ever seen the movie Ferry Across the Mersey, that's exactly where the ferry is. I've done a whole series on Liverpool at night. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you'll see it. And in fact, actually, my images were chosen by the Liverpool Echo. That's like the local newspaper in Liverpool. And they've done a whole feature about me, which is fantastic. And this was one of them. And actually, I found out the guy's name. I've forgotten it now. It was Peter someone or other. Do you remember, Carol? Yeah, anyway, after all these years. One of my great influences was Ouija. If you heard of Ouija, okay? Famous for murder photography in New York back in the day. And so this particular series, I was working with the Open Eye Gallery in Liverpool, and they said, go out with a flash, okay? Don't want none of this arty-farty stuff, with a tripod and taking really good exposures. Just sort of get out there and take people. So we did. That's why it's deliberately like that. It's hard and stark. It's what it is, okay? Just like in the style of Ouija. And I must admit, this is one of my favorite ones. I've had it in a few shows, and it's I just think it's great. Okay, this is the one I put in the show. So, Watson Farm is on Sutton Street. It runs, from Northbridge into Sutton. And it's been taken over now. It's been sold finally. But before it was sold, it was really broken down. And you could go in there and take photographs and things. And this is in one of the rooms.
I'd done a photograph previously, because the first time I went there, I nearly sort of jumped out my skin because I walked into this room and there's a wedding dress hanging from the ceiling. I've got some really good photographs of that. And I went back several times. In fact, I took my friend Al there as well. Is he still here? No, he's gone. Okay. And he's done some photographs there as well. But here, this is a washcloth. Okay. Now, it hadn't been used for God knows how many years. I wanted to tell a story, you know, but it was still hanging upon half of a peg. Okay. In the same room, hanging from the wall, there's a pair of boot stretchers, you know, things you put inside your boots and stuff and things. And that was the wall. And I just love the texture of the green, you know, the moss, you know, sort of growing down it's slowly. Another interesting thing, in the bottom left-hand corner, you can't see it there. There was the remains of a tripod. It had actually embedded itself into the wall. Someone years ago had gone there and left a tripod there. But I've got hundreds of photographs of this. These are all taken digitally. And I wanted to tell a story of, you know, what it's like. I'm attracted to abandoned, you know, dilapidated sort of places, things that tell a story. And I put it together as a triptych. And there was acceptance of the show, which is great. It actually won first prize at the Blackstone Valley Art Association. But just to show, I do like colour occasionally. This was taken on film, and then I just like the contrast between the white sky, the blue, and then these wind-crafted shapes of this. I just think it really sort of stands out. I just like the way that it sort of moves around and sort of, I don't know what to say about it really, but I like it anyway. Thank you.